Hello and welcome to the new series of Drishti IAS. I am Pooja Dwivedi, and in this segment today we are going to talk about nuclear disarmament. This topic is important from the perspective of prelims and also from the perspective of GS Mains paper 2 and 3. So let's begin with the topics of discussion that we are going to look at. First of all, we will talk about why in news. Then we will talk about fissile material cutoff treaty. We will also talk about conference on disarmament, which is the sole multilateral forum for talking about disengagement and disarmament when it comes to nuclear weapons. We will also talk about multilateral treaties and multilateral institutions on nuclear disarmaments. We will talk about India as a nuclear power, the United Nations Security Council. We will talk about the overall challenges faced by the conference on disarmament and the way forward. And in the last of the segment, I am going to offer you a mains-based question for answer writing practice. And in the midst of the segment, I will try to frame a pre-based question for you. Okay? So let's begin with why in news? Because speaking at a high-level conference under the presidency of Brazil, India has yet again reiterated its stand on the nuclear weapons. It says that India is going for a step-by-step, universal and verifiable approach or a treaty when it comes to nuclear disarmament. India also has reiterated its position on nuclear weapons. It says that India will stand by its no first use policy and non-use against non-nuclear weapon states. Now, if we talk about what has been the challenges recently, it's about the fissile material cutoff treaty. So, India has also said that negotiations and fruitful negotiations should take place in order to reach a final conclusion to this treaty. And also it talked about the prevention of nuclear weapons in outer space. Now, if we talk about the basic structure here, we will talk about the fissile material cutoff treaty, to which we will just look at the background. First, we will understand what is it, then we will talk about the background. So, this is a proposed international arrangement or an agreement that would prohibit the production of two main components of nuclear weapon, that is highly enriched uranium and plutonium. This could be a pre-based question for you, that this agreement deals with uranium and thorium, but no, it's actually uranium and plutonium, alright? And it also says that an FMCT, it would provide new restrictions for the 5 recognized nuclear weapon states. That is, nuclear weapon states, if we talk about, they are the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, the US, Russia, United Kingdom, France and China. And for the 4 nations that are not NPT members, that is Non-Proliferation Treaty members, that are Israel, India, Pakistan and North Korea. So this particular treaty, first, if we talk about those states who do not have nuclear weapon and have signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty, this particular treaty will already provide a ban on them not to either import, export and acquire any sort of fissile material such as uranium or plutonium. And if we talk about the other members, we have already talked about the statement with the other members. Now, if we talk about the background of it, if we talk about the discovery of nuclear elements, nuclear atoms, the consequences or the usage of such atoms in case of weaponry, it was already known. And if we talk about, it was in the year 1946 when the Eschenson-Lilienthal report, which was authored in part by Manhattan Project physicist J. Oppenheimer, it advocated for an atomic development agency to regulate fissile material. Now, this came to a dead end because it was not represented to the United Nations. Then, in the year following it, the other plan was proposed by the name of the Baruch Plan. Now, this also said that we should have an atomic development authority that is answerable to the United Nations. Alright? So, after that, United Nations passed a resolution 78/57L, and it was passed unanimously in 1993, which called for a non-discriminatory multilateral and internationally and effectively verifiable treaty banning the production of fissile material for nuclear weapon or other nuclear explosive device. So, if we talk about this resolution, this calls for non-discriminatory. That will lead us to know that there are certain 5 states that are nuclear possessing states and others are not. Alright, so there should not be a discrimination amongst them in order to not lead to any concentration of power when it comes to nuclear weaponry. Also, it should be multilateral. That means many groups to be involved, representation should be there, and effectively verifiable treaty. That means if a country possesses nuclear weapons or not, this should be verifiable. This should be checked in order to enhance accountability. When it comes to enhancing accountability, there are 2 treaties, very famous treaty. You have to tell me in the comment segment between which 2 countries have they been signed. First is the START Treaty, New START Treaty, and the second one is Open Skies Treaty. Alright, so moving on, in March 1995, the Conference on Disarmament took up a mandate which was presented by a Canadian ambassador. The Shannon Mandate, it established an ad hoc commitment that was directed to negotiate an FMCT by the end of 1995 session. Alright, and then after that what happened, there were certain problems with why this wasn't reached at a conclusion. The first problem was there was a problem with the verification process. First is that. And prevention of arms race in outer space, this treaty was also not reached at. There is a problem when it comes to reaching at a conclusion when it comes to outer space under this treaty only. That how should countries not use outer space for launching missiles, satellites, or continue or conduct any sort of nuclear tests in the outer space, right? So, China and Russia, they articulated a desire to hold parallel negotiations on preventing an arms race in outer space, a point which has further stalled efforts to begin FMCT negotiations. Now, many countries, they have stopped and they have actually stopped or they have stopped importing or even acquiring or maintaining the stockpile of fissile material. But there were certain reasons when this treaty could not be reached at because of the lack of consensus. There was no consensus. And of course, back then, USA was very threatened. It felt very threatened when it came to Soviet using or acquiring any sort of nuclear weapons. But now, as we are approaching step by step towards nuclear disarmament, we could see that United States, it stopped the production of high enriched uranium in 1992 and weapons grade plutonium in 1987. You can see about from China, of course, it did stop. Now, China, there is a problem with China when it comes to getting it verified, right? It's very discreet in nature. But it is believed that China, yes, it has stopped enriching high enriched uranium and the weapons grade plutonium in the respective years. If we talk about India, Israel, Pakistan, they are still ongoing for India in both categories, for Pakistan still. And Israel and North Korea status are given. You can see it and take a screenshot if you want to. Now, if we talk about Pakistan, Pakistan is actually threatened when it comes to its geopolitical situation with respect to India. Now, India is a weapon state, nuclear weapon state, although it did say that we will not use you will put it as a credible minimum deterrence. That means it will not be used first, but it will continue to be in possession of India in order to safeguard its integrity and the lives of people, because India is at a point right now where it is handling extreme volatility in the region when it comes to not only Pakistan but also China. So India needs to be very careful about that. So India says that we will not use it first, but we will maintain it to have a credible minimum deterrence. Alright, what is deterrence basically? Deterrence is just having a safeguard, having a possession of something that will create a fear in the mind of the other party that if they threaten or if they infiltrate the integrity of one country, they will receive or they will be at the receiving end of the negative consequence. Alright, so that is that. If we talk about the 2020 estimated global nuclear warhead inventories, the map is in front of you and you can see how we are actually on the verge of being a globalized nuclear weapon community, right? Moving on, if we talk about Conference on Disarmament, this is a multilateral disarmament forum established by international community to negotiate arms control and disarmament agreements, and it is based at the Palais des Nations in Geneva. It was first established in 1979 as the Committee on Disarmament, and it was renamed the Conference of Disarmament in the year 1984. If we talk about its achievements, it is not, we cannot say that it has achieved something remarkably because of the lack of consensus and suspicion, because lack of consensus and suspicion, and also the lack of clarity when it comes to verifiability process, confidence building, trust building. This all is lacking. So that is a challenge for COD. And India, in its paper in the year 2007, working paper, it did submit a working paper to Conference on Disarmament in the year 2007, and it reiterated its position and of course extended its support to the Fissile Material Cutoff Treaty. Moving on, if we talk about multilateral treaties on nuclear disarmament or multilateral institutes. Now, if we talk about basically multilateral treaties and institutions, what are these? Missile Export Control Regime. Now, if we talk about Missile Export Control Regime, these are non-binding in nature and they are actually an establishment when it comes to talking about non-usage of nuclear weapons and non-usage of nuclear weapons against other states who do not possess nuclear weapons. So that is the entire thing, to keep control, to keep in track what the entire globe is about to do when it comes to nuclear disarmament. So there are four in nature: the Nuclear Suppliers Group for the control of nuclear related technology. Now this was established in the year 1974 in reaction to India's nuclear weapon test. Alright, and India is not a part of it. And India's position, China is a part of it. India's position in it is being blocked, or India's entrance in it is being blocked by China under the pretext, you can say, that India has not signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So first is that. The second one is the Australia Group for Control of Chemical and Biological Technology that could be weaponized. Now, Australia Group was established in the year 1985 against the Iraq-Iran war. Alright? And India is a part of it. India became a part of it in the year 2018. Keep that in mind. So it basically deals with the weaponry which are working on chemical weapons, chemical technologies or biological technologies. Now, if we talk about India's nuclear weapon usage, it has been stated in the doctrine that India can use nuclear weapons against the usage of chemical or biological weapons. Alright, keep that in mind. Moving on, if we talk about the MTCR, it is for the control of rockets and other aerial vehicles capable of delivering weapons of mass destruction. Now, if we talk about the missiles, the warhead could not be more than 500 kg and it could not be for more than a distance of 300 kilometers. Alright, and India is a part to MTCR and it became a part to MTCR in the year 2016. In the comment segment, kindly tell me, because I'm going to tell you one thing, that G7 in the year 1987 established MTCR. Alright, in the comment segment, kindly tell me who are the members of G7. Alright, group of 7. Then comes the Wassenaar Agreement, Wassenaar Arrangement, beg your pardon, on export control for conventional arms and dual-use goods and technology, and this was formally established in the year 1996. India became a part to it in the year 2017. So it basically talks about the export control for conventional arms and dual-use goods. Dual use of nuclear energy means usage for weaponry and usage for other purposes such as civilian purposes for energy, for medical purposes. So that is dual use of any nuclear nuclear technology. Now, if we talk about India as a nuclear power, we have already talked about that India will not have a first use policy but a no first use policy. Now, if we talk about the recent events, if we talk about 2019, the defense minister did say that this could be changing if we see any sort of circumstance that demands a change in this policy. There is no saying that we will not think about using nuclear weapons first. Alright? And of course, we have already talked about non-usage of nuclear weapons against non-nuclear weapons possessing states. And then India is also a key partner to the global efforts when it comes to nuclear disarmament and strengthening the non-proliferation order. That means nuclear weaponry should not spread about. It should be controlled. Alright? And India has of course not signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty and Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. Why? Because India's geopolitical situation is such that India needs to maintain a credible minimum deterrence when it comes to dealing with Pakistan and China. And nuclear power, if we talk about India, it delivers total capacity of 6.7 gigawatt electricity. Now, this is contributing to about 2% of the country's electricity supply. Now, if we talk about India's energy demand, as the population is increasing, we need to meet the demands for them. And of course, if we talk about the economy recovering post-COVID era, post-lockdown era, that is why we also need nuclear energy for civilian purposes. And if we talk about it, then it's a three-stage plan. We will discuss it. India has ambitious plans to increase nuclear power generation capacity to 275 gigawatt energy electricity by 2052, and at the start of 2018, 66 reactors were under construction in India with a combined capacity of 4.4 GWE. And there is a three-stage nuclear power program which was formulated by Homi Bhabha in the 1950s. If we talk about Atomic Energy Act of 1962, it was framed in order to regulate, acquire and use uranium and thorium. Keep that in mind. Uranium and thorium. Alright. We have plenty of reserves for thorium but not that much for uranium. And stage 1, if we talk about, it is pressurized heavy water reactor which uses natural uranium as a fuel matrix and heavy water as moderator and coolant. Second stage of nuclear power generation envisages the use of plutonium obtained from the first stage reactor operation as the fuel core in fast breeder reactors. And third phase of India's nuclear power generation program is breeder reactor using uranium fuel. Now, you please look at this map. You can see the operational and under construction in India, the NPP operating and under construction in India. You can see the map. This will provide you a clearer picture. Now, if we talk about the United Nations Security Council, it is one of the major organs of the United Nations, which keeps in mind that it needs to provide stability, peace and harmony in the entire globe. And it is dominated by the 5 nuclear weapon states, that is US, China, UK, France and Russia. And there are 10 non-permanent members, and India this year has been selected or elected, you can say more appropriately, for the 8th time as a non-permanent member. And India is going to have the presidentship in August 2021, where it will provide for a representation for the third world countries who need to see a change or a reform in the entire United Nations Security Council, because it is an old world era. This particular organization is an old world era representation Now we have multipolarity in the world, so that is why we need to take care that our institutes, not only United Nations Security Council, but WHO, WTO, they are having proper representation. And India for the 8th time has been elected as a non-permanent member, and it makes a great case for India. And India has, of course, reiterated and preserved its position as a nuclear weapon state who is not having any sort of offensive policy. All right. So if we talk about from which category India was elected, it's Asia Pacific region. All right. So let's move on and talk about the criticisms of the UN structure. It is first of all, the permanent membership system we have already talked about, and 5 permanent members veto right and weak equal representation due to small number of members. So if we talk about the veto powers are as such that they could block the entry of some country in the permanent membership seat, or they could also talk about the election of the Secretary General. So such huge powers, this amount of unbridled power is given to the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, and on the note of that only, it is being criticized. Also, if we talk about different vetos, you can see here how many vetos have been done by the permanent members. Alright, moving on, if we talk about our offline batches at the Prayagraj branch, they are commencing from 24th of February in Hindi as well as English medium. The Hindi medium batch will be an evening batch from 6 to 8, and the English medium batch will be a morning batch from 8 to 10. Kindly contact on the given number for more information. Alright, now let's talk about the challenges to the Conference on Disarmament. So the first challenge is that, if we talk about the challenges, the first challenge is that there is a disconnect between commitments and implementation. The commitment, first of all, there hasn't been any sort of consensus which has been reached, and even if so, we have reached certain a little or tad bit of very piecemeal of commitment. We could not implement it properly. That is why you could see the rise in the number of nuclear war heads. Now, there is another problem, that is an inability to address the inertia or lack of disarmament initiatives. Although there are so many multilateral institutions and treaties which are in place, but we can see that we are developing, or unilaterally, even if we have developed, unilaterally pulling out of the treaties, such as Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, right? If you remember this treaty, which was signed by the P5+1 members along with, in agreement with Iran. Now again, we are seeing that Iran is not abiding by the rules of those agreements because US unilaterally pulled out of the treaty, right? Now if we talk about human security perspective, that is also a challenge. How to maintain a thin line of demarcation, how to thicken that thin line between human safety and human needs. Usage of nuclear atoms for any sort of purpose, such as energy generation, that could also lead to a disaster like Chernobyl. If we talk about another challenge, that is how to achieve and maintain a nuclear free world. Now, if we talk about the recent times, the geopolitical situation is such, the multipolarity is coming at, they're locking horns with each other, such as India and China. Someday it will be India, Pakistan and China. So, of course, nuclear weaponry is one of those weapons which are necessary right now for having a credible minimum deterrence. But now, who will decide that when and how, step by step, how to get rid of it? That is another challenge. Nuclear weapons and the economy. Again, we need nuclear weapon system in order to, nuclear weapons and the economy, in the sense, we need the nuclear atoms in order to get back the economy on track. But how to verify if the nuclear atoms are not being used for weaponry system and only for bringing the economy back? Alright. Now if we talk about the way forward, first is education as a method to promote global security goals. First of all, we need education. We need to engage with the youth and provide them special scholarship in order to have a career in such courses which deal with nuclear weapons or non-use of nuclear weapons, and of course deal with better and good practices when it comes to usage of nuclear energy. And confidence building measures, this could be achieved only and only if we talk about the multilateral institutions. They meet on a regular basis, not annually, maybe biannually, or maybe every now and then we could have a conference which needs to keep a track on the process of how and when to track the nuclear weapons or nuclear atom usage when it comes to each other. Then only there will be some kind of confidence building and trust building measure. And if we talk about another way forward, that is simultaneous operationalization of treaty. Now, one treaty could not be upheld at the cost of some other treaty, and all the treaties should have certain guidelines which work in tandem with each other and not in isolation. And those treaties should try to fill the gap which one treaty has not filled in. Alright, now if we talk about a mains-based question, this could be for practice. Write it down. What are your views on India's no first use nuclear doctrine? Should it be reviewed? Keeping in view the changing security dynamics in the region, you have to critically examine it in 250 words, alright? So that's it for today. Tomorrow we shall meet again with another segment. Until then, stay updated and thank you so much for watching.